When we look at cold plunging and you look at cortisol, there are research papers in sort of both directions, but most commonly what we see is that it is actually a cortisol modulator, which means that it's helping your cortisol regulate to the space that it needs to be. It's not spiking your cortisol per se. And does that mean that one person who's super nervous and freaking out before they get in with no coach there and is going to not have a cortisol spike? Like, of course that could happen, but with specific applied cold getting in full up to the neck, we're not seeing that that's the biggest challenge, right? So knowing that, managing your time, managing your temperature, getting to a space where you are understanding also the most important thing about cold plunging is really how you breathe. When you get in, before you get in, how you set yourself up from a visualization standpoint.
You regulate your cortisol before you get in. You're doing that with mindset activities, visualization. That's teaching your nervous system to get regulated prior to entry. Then you're in there using breath work to get regulated and using the reflex like you're talking about. When you're doing that all together, that's where the magic really happens. Kristin, so excited to have you today. Thank you for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we've known each other for so many years. You came to my first office that was down the street 10 years. I think it was like 10 years ago.
Yeah,
That's incredible. And you've been such a monumental force in health, wellness, biohacking, women's perceptions around all the things that are available to them. And so I can't wait to dive in with you.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's also just, it's really nice to see really good things happen to amazing people, and just the advancement and the growth of your company is just big congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And same, feeling so mutual.
Yeah.
But I know we have so much to dive into, but I want to ask you a few quick questions that I think kind of set the stage for the conversation. First is, what is one thing that you wish all women would know about cold plunging or just cold therapy in general?
Yeah, absolutely. The one thing I want women to know about cold plunging is that the anticipation of cold plunging is worse than the cold plunge itself. I think that there's a bit of trepidation sometimes for every human, but specifically females, because we tend to be less risk averse.
Yes.
So we need to have a little bit more of that, chutzpah to be able to dive in.
Yeah, it's so true. I love to dive into the kind of some of the mental aspects of cold plunging a little bit later.
Yeah, for sure.
Another question I have for you is around breath work. I mean, these are your two big pillars. I know you have many pillars, but the breath work pillar for me is so powerful. And I'd love for you to kind of give us a few thoughts about why breath work is so powerful.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is understanding, quite often I talk about how we need to learn how to DJ our nervous system. And DJing the nervous system just really means understanding regulation, that we can have the appropriate nervous system response to an experience or an event that's occurring in our life. And as we plug into breathwork, which is the remote control to the nervous system, this is how we plug into activating our system when we need to, and then calming it or bringing it back down to homeostasis, normal flow state after something occurs.
Right. And to unpack that a little bit, are we talking about parasympathetic, sympathetic, HRV,
yeah,
all of
really
those
talking
together?
about parasympathetic, sympathetic. I mean, it's all the things together, but what we want is to have this term that my mentor, Martin McPhillamy, uses, which is arousal flexibility.
Oh, okay.
So just like metabolic flexibility,
Yeah.
arousal flexibility is like, how can we get to a heightened state where we need to take action? And that could be that like a truck comes flying by on the highway and gets really close to your car, or it could be that you're lifting 100 pounds in the gym.
Yeah.
And so how do we take action with that level of nervous system tone, meaning sympathetic tone, charge, maybe be in a fight state, and use that correctly and accordingly. And then after we're done with the workout or the thing is past, that we can come back down to a more down-regulated, parasympathetic, calmer state.
Okay, I love that.
Yeah.
And then lastly, what's one habit that you wish every person would start doing? Health habit.
Yeah, one health habit that I wish everyone would start doing is, I think, more nasal breathing, more stillness, so connecting. Even it doesn't have to be specifically when we talk about breath work, it doesn't have to be this like hour-long thing every day. It just can be that you're taking 5 minutes and the power of pause. And in society today too, it gives us a little stillness, a little turning inward, which we all don't like, but we all can really use.
Yeah. It's so true. And I find that unfortunately people go weeks and sometimes months or years without doing any pauses. And it really catches up to you. It's just mind-blowing to me. And this happened to me myself, actually. I spent years not taking a pause, and it led to severe consequences in my own health, both mental and physical. And just putting those pauses in, it's dramatic how much it can change your life.
Yeah. And also some time to understand who you are as a human being. You know, I like to say how you like your eggs. It's like figure out what you like, what brings you joy, have a moment of reflection, and also gratitude in those moments, right? If we keep on going, then we never get to celebrate the ways that we're so blessed.
That's so true. So true. It's so funny when you say how you like your eggs. I just saw a comedian on Netflix the other day, and one of his little bits was about, like, he said, I don't know anything about myself anymore. I got my wife for that. She tells me what food I like and what I don't like.
Yeah, that could be real. That could be so real. It's like also decision fatigue too, right? Sometimes it's like just make them however you're going to make them, honey, or whatever, you know, just having someone else do some of the smaller decisions for you so we can use our brain power for all the bigger things in the world.
Exactly. So with that, you know, I made a commitment a long time ago to having half of our guests on this show be women.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so necessary because obviously like half the population is women and less than half the studies have been done on women, and less than half the people speaking about health, wellness, longevity have been women traditionally, from what I've seen through this last 10 years.
Yeah.
And I think it's so important to really understand there's lots of nuances between men and women. A lot of things are the same.
Yeah.
And a lot of things are different, and things need to be modified as well. And so, you know, I want to start off with a little bit of your journey. You're an OG in this space, right? You see a lot of people coming into this space right now, but you've been there for almost a decade or more now with your podcast.
Since Dave coined the term biohacking, I was floating around, and then I've been blessed by speaking at biohacking conference and a number of the conferences around the world just on women's health and biohacking, and also various other topics from like red light to breath to how we're utilizing tools over the years. So I've been fortunate, and there were a lot of men running the show in the early days, as you know.
It was a very bro-centric culture, and you were there kind of like, you know, you're tall, you're blonde, you're like out there like, hey, I'm here.
I'm here.
I'm here doing the cold plunge.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but now it's become, I think from what we see at Next Health, it's become an equal number of men and women are super interested, not just in biohacking, obviously, but health, longevity, and it's really become in the forefront of their attention. So thank you for, you know, being that voice from the very beginning. But I'd love to hear kind of how you got into this space and what you were doing before, and what was the impetus of you joining the movement.
Yeah, for sure. I think the other interesting thing is like I was doing health practices and trying to figure out health before the term biohacking came into the landscape. And also, I think a large number of women, even recently, I've seen like posts on Instagram about people saying, I really hate this term, like females saying, I hate the term biohacking. And I think it's just like, it's become something in our common vernacular, and many women I work with one-on-one are like, oh, you're my biohacking coach. So some people love it and they think it's like a cute, you know, moniker, and some people really just hate it. But I think it's all around. We all want to live a long time, and with not just getting older, but having vitality, right? This is the whole health span thing that is your mission is so based on. And for me, I grew up as a dancer. I was super curious and interested because I really liked food. How at that time, many of the dancers at a very young age were just like undernourishing themselves, like not wanting to eat too much. I hesitate to say starving themselves, but in some ways, you know, just really undernourished because they were concerned of what, you know, you're wearing these small leotards, you need to fit a specific picture or profile. And I was in that era wanting to work towards being a prima ballerina. They were some of the leanest bodies on the planet at that point. And thankfully now, you know, it's very different. And then we look at New York City Ballet Company, it's shapely, strong women and a bit more inclusive.
Right.
But the food thing was a challenge. And so I thought, okay, my first foray into understanding wellness or health was how can I eat things that I still really, you know, I love, and also stay in physical shape? Like how can I actually power my body? And so I did all the crazy things with food. I was doing food combining, like the book by the Diamonds was a couple who wrote a book about food combining, which I think has since been completely
What is that,
debunked.
food combining?
So it's like you only eat, you don't combine foods that go together. So you'll eat just fruits and vegetables on their own, like high water content food, and you don't mix starches with, your proteins. And so it was just like an interesting book at the time, right? It was like another, I don't want to say trend, but it was another like, hey, try this out. We think it will help you digest more quickly and more easily.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
And
so just another form of elimination diet
yeah,
again.
yeah. Like,
Right.
and interestingly enough, there were some ways I got healthier. We see this sometimes when you cut out any garbage from your diet. But I tried veganism, vegetarianism. I was just navigating through all the different eating lifestyles. And then I many years later, this is like a longer swath of time in my life, I read Younger's book, Clean. And then I was like, okay, I kind of get and understand this. And that led me to Mark Sisson's work. And so a lot of the pieces of the puzzle for me were around nutrition. And while I was doing that, I was teaching yoga and understanding the human body form, physiology, all the while I went to performing arts high school and then was like a theater person. So I was sort of doing both things at the same time. And then I drew all of my health and well-being into the periphery around my big corporate job. And so while I was working in spirits and launched Red Bull in the United States and people were out drinking all the time, I would be leaving the office at 6 o'clock at night. They'd be having cocktails and they'd be kind of making fun of me for going to like my dance cardio or my strength and conditioning class. And I think everyone in my circle and family and friends knew at some point I was going to end up in health. And I sort of didn't know that was going to come. So when I sort of left my big corporate job because I wanted my legacy to be supporting people, supporting women and understanding their body and their longevity, everyone was like, finally. And I was like, oh, I thought all you guys were going to be shocked. And everyone was like, we've just been waiting for you to like do this whole thing. So yeah, I left the corporate world and really started focusing full time on working with human bodies in many different ways, from personal training to having people understand how to eat well. I studied with Dan Garner to get my nutrition specialist certification, and on it goes, right? I think the one thing I would say about my trajectory, and I said this last night when we were eating dinner, is I went through all of these years and I have the amazing opportunity to work with so many people around health and well-being, and I always said I never really had this like mess to masterpiece story. You hear people who went through triumphant burnout and they finally crawl to the top and figure out their answers, or they get some dis-ease that hits them, and then it's a whole life shift. And I, for many, many years, didn't really have a story like that. I had this lean in and a big amount of passion, and I think people hire me continually because I aggregate so much information and data. And then I briefly mentioned last night at dinner, the last couple of years, I mean, I'm in a very different place now, but for about 2 years, I was sort of struck with some grief, a really big dance with anxiety and depression and suicidal ideation in ways that I never quite fully understood how a human body could have that. Even though I was working with people who were coming to me for breath, for cold, for all of these things, when you really get to feel it in your own system, it changes the level of compassion you have. So it's been an unfolding of many, many years of a lot of work and learning from great minds like you.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I mean, what I find really interesting about your story is that you had all these tools in your toolbox. And you developed them not out of real need, but just a real interest. And then when you needed them, you actually used them. And they help you through that terrible time in your life.
Absolutely.
That's just the power of this stuff really working, and it's really important for people to know what's available. And to your point about biohacking, I agree. Like there's a lot of term confusion and a lot of almost like negative connotation to it now, I think. And I really like the space that you're coming from. And I'd love to hear like how you would like to redefine the term biohacking, or just define the term biohacking for women now. How would you, if someone came up to you and said, what is biohacking? How would you define it to a woman?
Yeah, I mean, I always talk about health optimization. I sort of turn the light on that term to say it's like optimizing all these arenas of your health. And I want to be clear that biohacking, while it can be shiny toys and all this beautiful tech and injecting things and peptides and, doing drips and all of that, that it doesn't have to be so complicated or so expensive.
Right.
And I think it's important to note that we have a lot of access to free tools or low-cost tools that are the foundational baseline. And if we don't define our baseline, then we don't get to the end game of true health optimization, right? Because it's not about cutting corners. It's about changing the environment inside and outside of your body so that you can feel better, live longer, and play with your grandkids,
Right.
Yeah.
I completely agree with that. And the way I like to talk about it now is, I think all of us are on some health journey, right? And I think you start off trying to get your nutrition, your movement, and then maybe your sleep right. And then you get into some more advanced topics like gut health. Maybe you're trying to avoid toxins. Maybe you're trying to get your hormones in the right place. And then what's next, right? And so I always like to bring in the next is some of these kind of advanced modalities like you talk about. And I feel that a lot of people think that biohacking needs to cost a lot of money, but it really doesn't. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do that we know through science works, but most people have never tried, right? And so cold exposure is one of these types of is an example of this. There's also LED light. There's also sauna. We're going to talk about all of these things today. But I think, it's so important for people not to fear the term because they'll be missing out on what's next, right? And I think we need to understand that the science is available, especially in the United States. There's, facilities now around every corner that you can become members of. Even gyms have this in their locker rooms, the saunas and cold plunges now. It's getting more and more available because it works. And I think it's important for people not to be fearful of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I ask you, you're doing, you got your nutrition right. You're teaching people about nutrition, about yoga. What was the first time you experienced a cold plunge and how did that go?
Yeah, the first time I experienced a cold plunge, I was 18. The quick sidebar is the first time I really understood the power of cold. It was interesting. It came up on one podcast, a year ago. I didn't fully even recognize. But the first time I recognized the power of cold, I was 11. I was at a birthday party. Rebecca Bassio. It's so odd how you remember people's names, first name, last name. So shout out to Rebecca wherever she is in the world now. And I was like a night owl as a kid. I like to stay up late. And I really had a tough time getting up for school in the morning. And she said to me at her birthday party when I was sort of complaining about, I hate getting up early and whatnot. She said, I've been doing this thing and it's really helping. I've been getting up in the morning and just dragging myself out of bed, going right into the bathroom, turning on the full cold faucet and splashing water repeatedly in my face over and over. And it almost just seems like then I'm awake. And I certainly didn't look back at it then like the beginning of my cold plunging journey, right? But that entire year, I went home and every single school day got up in the morning and did this practice without thinking about, it's like the receptors in my face or, any of that. And I was amazed that it really worked. And so I did that. And that was sort of a touch point to cold. And then I was doing, unbeknownst to any, no protocols, no full understanding of everything that was happening in the system physiologically. Around 18 or so, I started doing, I was in New York and I was going to the Korean spas, right? So a bunch of naked women running around, dipping themselves in cold and hot and things like that. And it was fun and exhilarating and it felt right in some way for my health. And I would get in I would champion 30 seconds and be like, oh my God, I'm amazing. I did 30 seconds in there, And so those were some of the first moments. And then I think the most pivotal moment was I went and I trained. I was so fascinated by cold in general, but I went and I saw Laird Hamilton and Gabby Reese doing their XPT certification and all of the craziness. It's about 8 years ago now. And I just elbowed and kneed and clawed and saved and figured out a way to do a big weekend at their house, got connected with them during the course of the weekend, which was more of a recreation introduction. I met Patrick McEwen. I mean, it really unfolded so many things in my life. I met Dan Garner. I met these pivotal people that I worked with for years and still continue to work with. And that was the time that I started to really realize the power of our bodies and the power of the connection to cold.
Sure.
It was just a wild weekend event. By the end of the weekend, I was like, when is your next certification? I'm going to come and coach and learn this and get even more, indoctrinated into this philosophy. But I learned that cold plunge, like I will never forget the cold plunge I did at their house because it was, in typical fashion, Gabby and Laird have like an amazing collection of humans around, and many of them are like pro athletes or ex-surfers, ex-pro surfers, and things like that. And all of the people that were at the house doing all of these different modalities, like weights in the pool, 11 feet under, and cold and hot, and Laird on his Airdyne bike inside the sauna, ridiculousness with pot holders. But all of the people were there. It was like a great group of people. But the recognizable thing for me was that I was a little bit of the weaker link because I'm not a professional athlete. I'm still strong. I can breathe. I have all the things. But I'm super funny, but I like still was not a professional athlete. You know what I mean? So, and the pool work, because I was not as strong of a swimmer at that time, was really created a lot of fear in my body. It would come up from the water with like 40-pound weights at the bottom, and I'd have a little tears in my eyes being like, thankfully I'm in a pool. No one can tell I'm kind of crying. And but navigating stress response and expanding my window of tolerance and all these things was so interesting. That was like day one. Day two, I had to get in. I was like, okay, every single person here has like street cred. And I kind of am like the weaker link, and everyone knows it, and no one's judging me, really. But the next day, I knew we were doing cold plunging. And so I learned this beautiful life lesson, which was I went home and thought to myself, I'm going to get up tomorrow. I'm going to show up. I'm going to go first. I am going to do the full 3 minutes, which is what they were asking you to do. I was like, I'm going to head dunk on the way in, and I'm going to head dunk on the way out, and I'm going to do it like a Zen Buddhist. Like I'm just going to be so... I visualized, I thought about it, I like set myself up. And then the next day I went and I didn't even have to say I'm going first. It was like Mark, who was running that tub, was like, I think Kristin's going first, because I'm sure I was like very excited. And it was mostly men there. And so like all these guys around the tub watching me who had the day before just like crushed me in the pool and been so much better. And I got in and I head dunked and I like stayed in 3 minutes and I was super chill all the way up to my neck. And I watched them like sort of one at a time. You know, there's a little competition inside of me. I just sort of looked around at them one at a time, realizing like, oh, she was kind of the weakest link yesterday. I have to do at least as good as she is right now. Like I watched them realize that like, oh, there's some strengths here too. There's some strengths. And what a life lesson. Just like the approach is everything, right? The visualization, the planning, the knowing. And 3 minutes was a stretch for me at that point, right? I hadn't ever done cold to that length and with that many ice cubes, like sub 40 degrees. So it was pivotal experience and yeah, by being witnessed in that as well, it really bolstered my confidence. And then I never looked back. Like from that moment, I talked. Laird and Gabby had like, they're like, it's full. The training session is full for the certification this weekend. I was like, just kept asking until they let me in. And then I never looked back. I started putting people in ice baths on my roof in West Hollywood, right here when I lived here. Just putting more women than men for sure, because that's who I was working with, but just humans of all kinds. And people thought I was insane. Because you're talking about 7.5 years ago now? People, I was doing a 30-day cold plunges on Instagram when people were DMing me like, "Are you okay? Is this safe?" You know, it was like not on trend. You know, but I never looked back because of all of the benefits and all of the ways it created connection in my life.
No, that's so powerful. I love Gabby and Laird. You know, I've been to their home and they do some really extreme stuff there. But I've met so many people that they've introduced to this, and then when they, like yourself, they go out there and they spread the word. It's just the power of what happens there. I've heard it so many times because, you know, I think they were pivotal, and especially in California, bringing cold plunging to the human, like I would say, the forefront of people's knowledge, and also with sauna too. I mean, they're big into the
100%.
Their huge sauna that they have that's super hot in there.
And like, and then it's you know, 5 years ago when I landed in Texas, people started calling me saying, "I see you coaching this cold and this breath," and coaches and yoga instructors and teachers and facilitators, nurses, people started calling me or writing me in Instagram even the very first time and said, "Hey, can you teach me how to do what you're doing?" Which is like running people through the cold. Like, can you show me how to do this? And then 4 or 5 women wrote me at one point and said that. And I said, here's 3 weekends I'm home in Texas. If you guys will pay me a little money and you want to fly down here and get an Airbnb, I'll run like a mini training.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I don't know if I'll ever do it again, but like I put them all on text together and 4 women committed, paid me.
Incredible.
I put it out locally. I had 2 local people come, someone who ran a sauna company and another person from a gym. And it was like that's where Sherpa Breath and Cold was born. It was like people in Texas were saying, "Oh, Kristin, will you Sherpa Tony through the ice bath? Will you, Mary and her friend want to go in and get photos? Can you Sherpa them?" Like that term was born of my friend group, the collection of people that I knew and loved during the course of like the heightened part of quarantine.
I love it.
And so it's really just what a trajectory for me to be able to share this gift that I got given by Claire and Gabby with so many. It's now like 325 instructors I've certified. Yeah.
Right, and you're certifying instructors through Sherpa now, right?
Yeah.
So they're going out there and spreading the message as well. That's amazing. It's so powerful what you're doing. And, I want to kind of dive into some of the science, if you don't mind, but I want to be really mindful about talking about the science, because a lot of people ask me all the time, like, what's the science behind this? And I say, look, there's science behind this. That we can measure physiologically, but there's so much that we can't measure, right?
Yeah.
The mental resilience aspect of this, the nervous system regulation that you get from it. And I want to kind of dive into all of those, right? At first with cold, but then let's expand the lens to sauna and some of the other things as well, because I think there's so much benefit that you get from this that you're not going to find a randomized controlled trial that proves it, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you show resilience at a randomized controlled trial? But you have to understand, I think, those kind of softer aspects, you have to experience it for yourself and do kind of an end of one experience to see what you get out of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's super important about some of these therapies that we're talking about, because you can get lost in trying to like find the science and understand the science. But the reality is, it's not going to harm you for most people, right? And it helps a lot of people, and it's just an N of one every time, right? What are your thoughts around that?
I preach all the time at Sherpa, to the instructors, to my clients, to the athletes I work with, to everyone. It's like, people will say, what's the best time and temp for me? It's like, context is king and safety is queen. You need to understand how to do it safely. And that also speaks to people like wild swimming, right? You don't ever want to go out alone, et cetera. How your breathing is going to make a difference, right? So you're not lightheaded or anything crazy happening near bodies of water. But also just understanding your context. This is the end of one. This is like, what I'm preaching to the choir when you and I talk about this. It's what is the context? Not just about your body, your physiology, but what are your goals? Are you just trying to feel better? Are you trying to lose weight? I'm working with an Olympic skater. I've worked with people in the WWE. It's like those kinds of people and those athletes are going to all have different contexts, right? The university swim team is going to feel very different than a mom who's like, I just had a baby and now I'm trying to lose all this weight, So it's
or
important.
Your context that you shared with us where you were getting through a grief period, right? These are all different times of your life that you might want to look into some of these modalities.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll make sure we'll talk a bit. I'm a big mental health advocate after the last couple of years, and the way I continue to see clients showing up to me and the ways I'm working with them. I work with some younger 17, 18, 19-year-old women, and like there's really a crisis going on with people feeling having challenges unpacking their life's experience and what's gone on and where they want to be and who they are, and the AI coming into the fold. There's a lot of like fear, and there's a lot of just mental health struggles that people can utilize cold and breath for that matter, and sauna, and so many tools to really shift that in the right direction.
Yeah, really great tools. So let's talk about the mechanics of cold plunging and some of the science. So
for sure.
If a woman is coming to you for the first time and they ask you on the phone, how do I start cold plunging? What do I do? How would you tell them to start the process of cold plunging, and kind of why it works from a scientific basis?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. The science is always changing, right? But there is a lot of research on varied styles of cold. The challenge with it is, and I was just looking at some studies this morning because it's like continue to be a research nerd to look at things, but it's like, some of the studies they'll tell you like the protocol, but they won't actually tell you the temperature of the water, which is like, well, how am I supposed to mimic this? So understanding that there's like, it might be a left arm in ice cold water pre-training for 18-year-old males. It might be a full body immersion. It might be cryo. The temperatures are all over the place. If it's wild swimming, it's going to be, maybe they track the temperature every day people went in. Maybe they just gave like the median temp. So there's a lot of different swaths of information, but what we do really see is that we're getting benefits physiologically. We know the catecholamines. We know all of the neurochemistry that happens, generally speaking, for most people in a cold plunge, and we understand what happens with nervous system tone. So there are tried and true pieces of research across the landscape of research that really bolster all of the things that can shift in the body. So when a woman first shows up to me, and again, humans, when we're speaking about women too, I think it's a little bit important to just say like physiological females, because like the hormone profile difference and these are the things that are causing shifts. But when a woman first shows up to me, typically they're asking about cold plunging. It's more like that nervousness or the anticipation of actually doing it that's holding them back than anything else, right? They may have Raynaud's. They may be like, I'm trying to get pregnant. Is this okay? There's some other questions that come up with that. But I always want them to know, like, you don't have to start at what you're seeing on Instagram. You don't have to be Joe Rogan 21 and a half minutes in a 38-degree Morosco Forge, okay?
Right, exactly.
You can, like, no offense to Joe, that's all well and good, but at some point you're staying in too cold and too long. It's a point of diminishing returns at a cellular level. So letting people know that they can start where they're at, like, and also with what they have. Because if you don't have a cold plunge at home and you don't feel comfortable going to a venue and you can't find cryo or something, it's like, I want them to get in cold water. So most people have a shower or a hose in the backyard. Exactly. It's like, let's start there and see if we can get you to get into a shower. And maybe it's a minute or maybe it's 3 minutes. Maybe it's starting on hot and then going to cold. Maybe you're just really a superhero and you're like, I'm going to step in on cold, do 3 full minutes and step out on cold. I in the 7 years ago or something, I was at some hotel with a curtain because my home shower had a glass wall, and I just did like a 3-minute cold shower and filmed the video and sent it out to everyone being like, if I can do it, you can do it too. Right. So starting where you're at and understanding that, there's been a lot of controversial conversation around temperature for women and is ice bath, practice good for females. But starting at 50 degrees, if you need to start at 50. I think above 50, it's like, are we in a cool plunge? Are we in a cold plunge? And we do want to have that charge to the system. You do want to increase your window of tolerance and have this, hormetic stressor, right? So much of what we do, lifting weights to, cold plunging can be a hormetic stressor, which is just expanding our abilities, expanding our landscape, giving us something to adapt to.
Right, exactly.
So picking the right temperature and then, starting where they're at.
Yeah. And so if someone doesn't want to go to a venue and they don't have a cold plunge at home, just getting in the tub, putting ice in it, measuring the temperature is a good way after doing the shower piece. I think it's a good way to step into this. I think the shower is a great way to introduce yourself to it. And one of the things that I talk to people about, not just women, but people in general, is the visualization aspect of it and giving yourself the why really helps before you get in, right? And you mentioned both of those, and I think those are so important because it kind of helps break through the anticipation fear, and it gives you, just like you at Gabby's house, it's you visualized it, you thought why you wanted to do it, you wanted to prove yourself to these men that were there, like, underwater lifting weights.
Ego.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, and everyone's why could be different, right? When you were 11, it was, you wanted to feel awake when you were awake, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. What was her name? Robin Braziano?
Rebecca Bassio.
Sorry.
Isn't it so funny? It's so funny.
Know.
Like, she's out there. I've talked about her a couple times in that context.
At 11, which is incredible. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think going into this with a visualization where you imagine yourself under the cold shower, maybe you say, I'm going to be there for 30 seconds. You feel that for 30 seconds before you actually do it can be monumentally powerful in getting through that initial experience. And then you can experience the after, which you can also visualize, which is a new sense of energy and vitality and focus and all of that,
yeah,
right?
like power, clarity, grit, all of it. Yeah, and at Sherpa, we call it, I speak to it about, we call it ICE, like I period, C period, E period, which is like a great little acronym, but for intentional cold exposure, right? Because we all talk about deliberate cold exposure where we're like, okay, I'm going to deliberately do this, but what is sort of missing from that is the intention. So how do you set yourself up with the intention of what is going, hey, I'm going to go ask my boss for this big raise today. Well, let me practice by getting in either a cold shower, a tub of ice. Let me just sort of practice my power in a room and standing for myself, even in a little bit of stress, by doing this practice so that I could kind of work all of that out of my system and then go in the office and then ask for my raise, or whatever it might be.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's a fantastic example of how you can set an intention and come out of it after a cold plunge and just feel so much more confident about the next steps and what you're going to do.
Yeah, for sure.
And then as far as some of the science around why cold plunging works, can we talk a little bit about, hormetic stress?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And those of you who are graduating too, just I think it's important to say, graduating from shower to tub, if you have a tub in your house and you can use your bathtub, or you have any kind of vessel that you can throw ice into, I think that there's a notion of people they go and they get a couple bags of ice from the store, and there's a dilution that happens. So just a reminder to anyone who's listening, if you're going to go for it, it's go for it. Go get, 65 to 100 pounds of ice. Get your family involved. Make it something that can be kind of fun, exhilarating, maybe even a little scary, but just in a fun way. And just really go for putting the ice in there, because we always underestimate how much ice to use when it comes to sort of the water.
Right.
And then you're like a human champagne bottle. You put the ice in first and then the water after. That's the move.
And just you can even buy one of those pool thermometers that they're really cheap and on Amazon, and put it in there and measure the temperature so you're getting enough ice as well.
Yeah.
Right?
It's a really I digress, but I just think it's always important to talk about that. Yeah.
One more digression. How do you feel about dunking your face in a cold bowl of ice? That's a big trend on TikTok now.
It is. Look at you on TikTok. Yeah. I think it's a great practice. I mean, I just was talking to someone wrote me a company that's designed a little bowl that's shaped like your face to make it all perfect. And I'm listen, everybody has a salad bowl or something that they're a mixing bowl. Just use a ton of ice, fill it with some water, and then in the morning you can get up, and it's sort of mimicking the thing that I did when I was 11 in a bit of a better way. Taking a couple minutes. And of course, you have to take your face out to breathe every so often. And so just doing that over the course of a couple minutes, a few rounds, 5 or 10 times, it's going to change the whole course of your day. I think it's hard for people to believe until they do it.
Yeah.
But you're creating a mammalian dive reflex, micro response, you're mood boosting, you're eliciting chemicals in the brain and the body that are just going to make you feel clearer and better and happier. It's how do you bring joy in? It's a bowl of ice and your face in there. It's so simple.
I have people that swear by that. I mean, they don't cold plunge. They just do the ice water immersion of their face, and they swear by it. They say it's completely changed their life. And so,
And if you think that's good, and you think a cold shower is good, and you think cryo is good, just wait till you put your entire body into either a freezing cold body of water or a big tub of ice cubes.
Exactly.
It's life-changing.
It is. It really is.
Yeah.
And I have a plunge at my house, which is the fancy version of all this.
Yeah.
But that's only because I've been doing this for years now, and it's great to have kind of the fancy version that cools the water for you, but it's not necessary. It's easy to do it with ice, and this just prevents me from having to go to the store and get ice all the time.
Yeah, it's convenient. And listen, this is something that I think you and I want to keep pushing people into in some beautiful, loving, kind way, which is I will talk to clients who really fall in love with these practices, and I will say, you're in a home with your family and your 2 kids, and what is the investment you want to make in your health and well-being? Because the reality is you could put 15 or 20 grand together at some point to have a sauna and a cold plunge at your home, and it's going to save you that money in healthcare expenses down the road.
Exactly.
And it's even if you were to go to a facility, and it costs $150 a month in a membership, or there's ways that you earn that back, and you definitely earn it back in health, lifespan, the way that your family's connecting over these tools. It can be something that becomes a real, it's like sitting around the dinner table, but you're doing kind of other activities. So
exactly.
It's worth the investment.
It's trying it and making sure that this is something that you want to keep doing, right? And you're going to use. And then I think it naturally happens to people that they're just gosh, I'm going every day to the gym to use a sauna. Or I'm buying all this ice. I just want to make this more convenient.
Yeah.
What's the investment going to be for me? And I think it just naturally progresses that way. The key is to just get started and give it a shot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, that's the big win.
Yeah. Let's go back to hormetic stress.
Yes,
Describe hormetic stress,
keep me
what
on
it
track.
is, why it's important. I love this.
So hormetic stressor, just for anyone who's listening, it's something that we're applying a specific dose of stress to the body. This is eustress versus distress. Distress would being so much stress that it would have a negative response in the body. So we're applying this eustress, this healthy, positive amount of stress, so that our body can create an adaptation and get better, faster, stronger. In this case, more temperature adapted and cellular health-wise, we improve, our connectivity, cold shock proteins are folding, all of this nerdy science that comes up with it. But all in, that hormetic stressor is doing something for everyone who's listening, who's trying this, which is expanding your window of tolerance. And that's maybe a phrase people have heard a little bit more often than hormetic stressor. The window of tolerance being the space with which your nervous system can actually stay regulated. So what experiences or things are showing up, expected or unexpected, quite often it's the unexpected ones that grab us, but what things are showing up that you can actually stay regulated in or within, or at least if you're navigating your system, you're hyper aware of where your nervous system tone is. And I keep saying I'm going to make a t-shirt that's like, how do we practice this beautiful practice of no matter where we go, no matter where we end up, that we are the most regulated person in the room. Right. And by that, I don't mean calm, right? Just the most regulated, meaning anything can happen at any time and I can have an appropriate response to it, or I can, if someone else is having a very upregulated experience, that I can be there to be like in connection with that person and really help regulate the rest of the room, right? And if we all showed up in our environments, like very much so, I think, if I can use the example of last night, I showed up to your home, you're already so regulated, you're welcoming, everyone there is very grounded, a lot of people doing their own work on their own body and physiology, and there's so much human connection, and there's so much, even in the highs and lows and excitement of the meal and the dinner, everybody is really regulating to stay on the same page with each other. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that when you can feel that way in a space. And without saying it, what's happening in your home is that everybody feels safe and safe enough to be vulnerable and to share and to be exactly who they are. And that's just, isn't that what we want for the entire world, And so it's like building a practice that creates this hormetic stressor that you can then adapt to, helps you be more regulated in every general environment that you enter.
Exactly. That's a beautiful description of it. And I think it's useful to talk about the opposite of being regulated, which is anxiety, which is even depression, which is bipolar. These are all the extreme versions of having this dysregulation in your nervous system for years and years and over time. And so if anyone is suffering from those issues, you're probably getting prescribed medications for it. I think one way to lower your dose of medication and eventually work to getting off of these medications is to bring some of these practices around regulation into your life, whether it be cold plunge, sauna, breathwork. Over time, you'll see your nervous system getting more and more regulated, and it could be possible to get off of some of the medications that you're on and live in this state like you're talking about, where you feel safe, where you can be vulnerable, and where you don't potentially need these medications anymore in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely, there's always a case to be made to say to people, like, don't do anything too quickly or go off your meds too fast if that's your thing, right? There's a case to be made for these pieces. But I can speak from my experience that I was very, even in navigating like heightened states of anxiety or anxiousness and low states of depression and having challenges getting out of bed and having some connection to my childhood traumas and things like that, that for me, I was, and for my body, I'm still pretty anti like pharmacological intervention. Like I didn't want to go on SSRIs, and it remains, I'll never be able to go back and try it for a little while to see, right? And I was really staunchly opposed to it for my own body. And even with my mom and my family being like, hey, maybe you should just do this for a little while, it'll make you feel better. And I wanted to use these tools, and I wanted to sort of stretch to the other side and see if I could navigate it. But for me, I really used tools like adaptogenic herbs. Like I used rhodiola, which people don't talk about as much. It's like more research than ashwagandha. And for me, it had a really beautiful effect of, taking 3 rhodiola capsules over the course of the day. It's in a flower, and that working. And there's plenty of studies that show that going like nose to nose with like antidepressants and SSRIs and things like that, and then incorporating breath and cold and pieces of the puzzle. I will also say to anyone who's listening, navigating these things, there were days that I was like, I know the tools are in my building. I have 2 cold plunges, a sauna in my building, and I still like didn't want to leave the apartment, right? I'm coaching this. I'm at a high level. I'm an expert in this arena, and when mental emotional things strike, I think using cold and using these tools are important. And also I want people to give themselves some grace. And I will say that the other big tool in my toolkit was like I needed to ask people to be connected. I needed to ask for help. I needed to say, will you come cold plunge with me? Not because I was scared, but because someone showing up to my place and being more in community with me and being able to even just hear me talk for a couple minutes about having a rough morning really helped shift the conversation and shift my physiology. And then I would cold plunge with someone, and then the memory comes back of like, oh, of course, I'm better. It's the same thing when we go and we lift heavy weights, there's like the more we get a chance to sort of train our bodies, we can feel that cascade of bliss chemicals really shifting us. And it's like a natural way to be able to create that shift.
Sure, and that is so true. And, one of the things I think about when just listening and talking about cold plunging a lot right now, especially when it relates to women, is there's a lot of talk right now about women, potentially it's harmful to women, and specifically around states of hormonal dysregulation, whether you're in a state of high cortisol or perimenopause. Those are the two states that people are talking about cold plunging in women specifically, which is kind of odd to me because, as a male with high cortisol, I still use cold plunging to help me regulate my stress levels, hormones, and sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
And so I'd love to hear your thoughts around how you talk to women about these topics now.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to shout out anyone who listened to Mel Robbins and Dr. Stacey Sims had a podcast that just went viral. A snippet, of course, goes viral. It's a little bit out of context. And also that sort of, I felt, gave women permission to not cold plunge. Yeah. And it's not that I think anyone should do anything they don't want to do. Right. It's that I want it always to feel accessible to people and not to feel impossible or not to feel like it's going to have a negative effect or be highly detrimental for females. So they spoke a bit about temperature and understanding that and using cold. I think the thing with me, and I've done now solo-sodes and podcasts and interviews on this as well, is understanding context is important. And also knowing that you can start at a slightly warmer temperature, but working yourself down to that like 40 degrees is not something that is impossible for females. Right. And really drawing yourself, and when we compare ourselves to men, there's a few things to look at, right? So males tend to do better with daily plunging, really cold, especially if it's before noon when you're like, as your testosterone is in full effect, and it's we see that men can sort of tolerate that a bit better. And there are plenty of women that are doing daily plunges. So not to slight them. I am a bit more conservative on daily plunging with female physiology because I think many women are not hormone testing, are not out there. I mean, you probably see this all the time. Someone comes in and says, well, something's going on, I should test my hormones. It's like, when was your last hormone test? They're like, never.
Never, right.
And so if you already have some dysregulation in your hormones, added stress, it's not necessarily just the cold water, but it's the stress of the cold that can dysregulate you a bit further. Yep. And so it is something to consider and think about. And I think if a human being, any human being is getting like 3 or 4 cold plunges in the course of a week, we're doing great stuff. We don't have to push the envelope. So there is that notion. I think it's like every other day is probably great for women. There's no real temperature barometer except for the fact you want to get in to the level with which you are adapted. And to speak about the cortisol thing, Dr. Thomas Seeger was just, he was on a couple shows and he's done research and written some books as well. Really, we look at cold plunging, and again, it's very specific to the physiology of the person, the bio-individual. But when we look at cold plunging and you look at cortisol, there are research papers in sort of both directions, but most commonly what we see is that it is actually a cortisol modulator, which means that it's helping your cortisol regulate to the space that it needs to be. It's not spiking your cortisol per se. Now, does that mean that one person who's super nervous and freaking out before they get in with no coach there and is going to not have a cortisol spike? Like, of course, that could happen, but with specific applied cold getting in full up to the neck, we're not seeing that that's the biggest challenge, right? So knowing that, managing your time, managing your temperature, getting to a space where you are understanding also the most important thing about cold plunging is really how you breathe. When you get in, before you get in, how you set yourself up from a visualization standpoint. And this is sort of why, we all love Wim Hof. We all might not be doing as much cold if it weren't for Wim in general. Right. But and Wim Hof is doing a lot of the stuff like in mountains, mountain climbing in his shorts, and there's horse stance and there's movement and there's big super ventilated breathing, and all of that can look really scary to females. Yeah. And And badass females too. It's like, what is this okay? Is this, what's going on here? There are reasons that Wim is breathing that way, especially because he's trying to keep his body temperature in general warm because he's in these snowy landscapes, and he's also breathes in very various ways, but he's known for the superventilation.
Yeah.
So we don't need to be able to, and I always coach first timers and early plungers, we don't need to be like hyperventilating or superventilating ourselves. If we want to train for the game of life, because we get in ice baths, not to get good at getting an ice bath, we get in ice baths to get good at life, then we want to have as much of a regulated, calmer nervous system, nasal breathing, setting ourselves up for success right before we go in. We want to get in and let whatever the cold shock response happens in the body. It might be like an F-bomb or a big breath or a big inhale or oh my goodness, what's happening to me? But as soon as we can come to the awareness to get back to that sort of nasal breathing, long nasal exhales, being in a space where your breath is telling your body you're safe, right? And then getting up to our neck so that our heart rate actually naturally slows down, right? Mammalian dive reflex, we can even get up to our chin or our cheeks. It slows naturally the heart rate autonomically, so we don't have to do anything about it. And it can calm us to the best of our ability within that state in the cold. So it's like navigating so many cool components of this. And more and more, I just want women to understand it is so accessible. It is so manageable. And so many women that I'm working with, so many females, whether they're athletes or, women executives that are running huge companies, they really I see not just like the Instagram win of being in the cold tub, right? Yeah, I'm a badass. But I see the big win of they start to, little by little, adhere and adjust, like adhere to other protocols, adjust their lives, step into everything they're doing with more confidence and just understanding their capacity. And that's the win. Like, I know it's cool to have a photo and a bunch of ice cubes, but the big win is people are like, oh, I was born into this world to do this great thing. Yeah. And now I know that I have the ability to do it. And then they go out and they do it. And that's the magic. Like, that's to me why it's such a soulful practice.
Yes, yes. And what I love about kind of your message, big picture message, is you've tied together cold plunging, breath work, mindset into this practice that all needs to happen together. And what I see, we have cryotherapy chambers downstairs at our location, and a lot of people, they work themselves up, they're stressed, the anticipation, they go in there, they're like yelling and screaming, they can't wait to get out, they're just like going nuts the whole time. And the whole experience from the moment they walk in through the front door to actually getting in and getting out, they massively increase their cortisol levels. And that's like, that's for the Instagram picture sometimes, But the people that go into the entire practice by putting these three aspects together, the visualization, the mindset piece, the why, and then the breath work piece, which I love what you said about, the Wim Hof type of breathing might not be right for everybody. Actually using the cold and the breath work together at the same time while you're in the cold to down-regulate your nervous system while you're in there. That's where the magic really happens, right? And so you regulate your cortisol before you get in. You're doing that with mindset activities, visualization. That's teaching your nervous system to get regulated prior to entry. Then you're in there using breath work to get regulated and using the reflex like you're talking about. When you're doing that all together, that's where the magic really happens. And so that's, I think, big picture, your message, putting those things together is where you can really negate the negative aspects that you hear about and really, really improve on the positive aspects. Does that summarize it pretty well?
Yes, you did a great job. I think it's really like what level of attunement to your own system can you have? Because I love to get into what is cryo or cold water immersion, whatever it might be, and head dunk or put myself under the water and count to 20 seconds or whatever those things are that I've worked up to and adapted to. And I love to have like a very Zen moment where I'm tapping into like my internal system to say, what's going on? I'm so present. I sort of will speak out loud sometimes to myself about, you're being really hard on yourself lately. And I can just be so present with where I am, both nervous system and also like psychologically in life, mindset wise, that I'm clear. But then I also have times where I'm like, okay, today I'm going to do 6 minutes in and outs, dunks on every in and out, play some crazy loud music, hold myself under for 10 seconds on each dunk. I'm like doing an advanced protocol, but I'm doing it with a place from flow, right? Not from like oh my God, I'm skittish and I'm fearful and this is crazy. And so it's like, how can I this is this whole window of tolerance thing. This is expansion of our body's ability. And it's like, why? I know it's just a cold plunge. I know it's just cold water. I get it. But like, it really, there are no two modalities I've ever put together. And I've done a lot of biohacking that are as effective and efficient as putting breath and cold together for pivotal change, just mindset, ability, capacity, everything. And it's so beautiful. And then at some point, I'm going to have to take you up to like a frozen lake and cut the big holes in the lake and like get you in there. It's like, then you're grounding, you get sunlight, your feet are in the silt, you're like in the cold water, and it's like nature abounds.
I've never done that before.
It's so amazing.
I have gone ice fishing in Minnesota, which is a little bit different, but on a frozen lake. Never thought about jumping in.
Never about getting in the hole. It's so amazing.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, I think it's super powerful too, to do it and then to understand that you have the power to regulate your nervous system and your emotions while you're going through the whole experience. And then when you get into a routine, maybe doing it 3 or 4 times a week, the knowledge is so powerful to know that you can do it, because in these extreme circumstances, you have the ability to regulate your nervous system. And so then that translates into maybe getting on stage, getting on a podcast, dealing with tough people, asking for the raise at work. It absolutely translates.
100%.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it gives you so much power in your day-to-day life.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to dive into the specific breathwork technique that you teach people when they're in the cold.
Yeah,
Tell me how that goes.
Yeah, for sure. So for the earlier beginners, when they come and they breathe, we do about a minute, maybe 2 minutes of breathwork next to the tub. And that's typically as simple as like a 2x breath. So it's like whatever your inhale, you're doubling the exhale, and it's all nasal. I also am very keen on making sure people put their hands on their bellies, or maybe I have my hands with consent on their shoulders, so that we remember that when we're breathing, this is a really good thing for everyone who's listening to do right now. If you put your hands on your belly and you breathe through your nose, as you inhale, is your belly expanding, let's say forward or maybe laterally to the side, but are you expanding the body like a barrel? Sometimes I say making pot bellies cool again, and women hate that, but inhaling through the nose is like when we expand the vessel. It's not the thing that I learned as a ballerina, because I had paradoxical breathing when I was young, where it's like I inhale and I lengthen and I suck in my belly because I'm a girl and I want to, butt out, chest out, suck in the belly. That's not biomechanically correct.
Right.
We want to inhale and then
feel the belly
I can
expand.
feel the belly expand. So I will check in to make sure that people are feeling that kind of grounding and that expansion. Sometimes there's, bodily confusion. It takes a minute to kind of figure that out. And then really doing that 2x breathing. So what I find is like a perfect count for the cold is inhaling for a count of 3 and exhaling for a count of 6, right? And so I have them do that next to the tub for a minute or so. And then I always say, for the most part, a similar thing, which is that without hesitation or expectation, step in, all the way up to the neck. And that's really to get in people's mind, because what starts to happen when people stand next to the cold tub, they're like not really listening to you. They're like anticipating. They're like they're lost in space somewhere. So that's the last thing I say as they get in, and then I'm there the entire time with them. Just sitting and working with them and having them. Again, have a moment when you first get in the cold. Every human body is going to have some reaction to ice cold water. This is what cold water feels like. So have that reaction and then catch yourself and work to get back to that like 3 inhale, 6 exhale, or maybe that's too long for you. You need a 2 inhale, 4 exhale. But the point is to lengthen the exhale, and the big point is to get to nasal-only breathing. And I find that super helpful because this is how we want to breathe when shit hits the fan in life, And it doesn't mean you can't, when you want to upregulate your system, that you can't do like some Wim Hof or super ventilated or shift your breathing. But the reality is that we wouldn't do that style of breathing all day long. So let's like train for what we really need in this world that is so fast-paced and so filled with like tons of environmental stimulus all the time.
Yeah. And I think what's really important, I have crazy stories. So the first time I cold plunged was with Wim Hof and Jim Carrey.
Nice. Oh my God, that's amazing.
I have this crazy picture of the 3 of us in a crazy 35-degree cold plunge.
Wow.
And Wim Hof has incredible breathing techniques, but for his breathing technique is really about upregulating your nervous system, creating heat within your body so that when you get into the cold, it doesn't feel so cold.
Yeah, you're already there.
Right?
Yeah.
Exactly. You're already there. And that's very different. And that could be useful, but it's not useful in my opinion for day-to-day life, like you're mentioning. I live in a state of upregulated, nervous system, and so what's more useful to me is exactly what you're talking about: is using breath to down-regulate the nervous system, using like a 2x or 3x breath, and that's where I feel that most people should be practicing that for exactly your point, which is you need that ability in day to day, because we live in modern society where, unfortunately or fortunately, there's a lot going on, right? And so whether you're driving through traffic or you're entering your work environment, whatever it is, you're living in a state of upregulation, and having the ability to down-regulate using cold plunge, because what happens is when you're not in cold, it's much easier to down-regulate, right? And you have this technique in your back pocket of using breath work to do this.
Yeah. And it's so, it's like I have at sherpabreathandcold.com/listen, I have a breathwork protocol that's like 10 minutes that's great for like pre-sleep or before the ice tub or anything if you're feeling nervous. And then there's also a guided cold plunge that's like a beginner 3-minute cold plunge, which is great if people just want to, like, you can download it for free and then you can just put it next to you and you
What's
can
the website again for that?
It's sherpabreathandcold.com/listen. So you
fantastic.
can download both of those, and then you can have me in your back pocket if you want me to be in your back pocket, just guiding you through a cold plunge. So it's a 6-minute track. It preps you with the breath in the beginning, gets you through the cold, and then gets you out of the cold. So you feel like you can be coached, and everything you just said is so poignant. And to sort of frame it also in another way, just for people who are listening, things are going to happen in life that are unexpected and that are not in our plan. Right? We are going to have a stressor hit. We're going to get the phone call where, knock on wood, this happens to nobody, but like someone's in an accident, or we're going to be fired and we don't know. We don't have a minute or two before that happens to be like, hold on a second, I'm about to get fired. So let me superventilate my breath and breathe and organize myself so I'm like ready for it to hit. So what I want people to do is practice for the game of life, which means how do we stay regulated in a space when stress can hit at any moment, and trial ourselves through that so that when it actually does, we know at the very least how to breathe. Like when you're in LA traffic, it's so funny. I'm like back driving in traffic after living here, and I'm like, oh, I feel myself getting agitated. Like, what's wrong with you, buddy? And I'm like, oh God, this part of me is like not regulated, right? Finding the places I have a little less freedom and being like, how can I breathe into that and channel, the work in the cold and the understanding of the nervous system.
Yeah, it's so powerful. And thank you so much for making this available to everyone listening for free. I mean, that's incredible. And I think it's a really great way to step into, no pun intended, step into cold plunging. To have you there as a guide to do the entire practice you developed over a decade and just give it to people. Thank you for doing that.
I recorded it with some twinkly music and all the vibes. It's like copyright free. It's like I've covered all the bases so that people can just listen to it and play it and share it and not ever have to feel like, I think what I really want people to never feel like is, I don't want people to feel like they're like alone on this journey of optimizing their well-being, or that they're scary things that they're practicing. Like, I'm so stoked for people to try these practices, and even just 5 or 10 minutes of breath work during the course of the day. I'm so stoked for people to try these practices that I just wanted to put something in the world that was like simple enough that they could just like download to their phone and be like, okay, let's see what this Kristin girl is talking about, Let me see if she really helps me get through the cold plunge this time. But
I love it.
It works.
I love that. And can we talk just real quickly about sauna and how that fits into the equation? When did you experience sauna? And I know you at Laird and Gabby's house, of course you did, but I'm sure it might have been before that. Talk about how that fits into the puzzle.
Those Korean spas, all different types of sauna experiences. And like I lived in New York City for a number of years. I was in the Russian and Turkish bathhouses, and just like in all different sort of odd ways, which is just, I think as I reflect back on it, like just speaks to how oddly, beautifully curious I was my whole, like really from like my whole life, but like from 18 onwards, I was like going into the city during college and trying to figure these things out, and so drawn to that. And when you look at sauna, this is like the area where science and research is so much, and it's very, very clear reduction in all-cause mortality. We have studies that have followed people in Finland over 30 years to see like if they had a regular sauna practice, what how their lifespan and their health span and how their disease states, were reduced overall. And like, so we have so many studies around sauna that it's undeniable the benefits, especially as a cardiovascular mimicking tool, and, reduction in hypertension, so lowering blood pressure and helping with your heart, that it's almost like, it's silly that there isn't one in every home here.
Yeah.
Like, that's really how I get there's costs associated and whatnot, but like when you go to cultures that have been doing this for thousands of years, you go to, Finland and Scandinavia, there's like, there's a sauna in every block, if not in every home.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. It's so powerful. And I think we're going to get to the point where I'm hoping we get to the point where saunas are just built into homes now.
Yeah.
And how powerful would that be for detoxification, for nervous system regulation, for so many benefits, sleep, all of it.
Yeah, so all of it. Depression, mood boosting. Like there's so many on the flip side of cold and hot and contrast therapy. There's so many mood boosting, things in there. So many health vehicles to better health. It's like how do we work with these tools together? And then the one thing that's like important to be noted, I think, as we bring more cold and heat and contrast therapy, meaning going back and forth, which also sidebar, if you're doing contrast therapy and you want to optimize it, please make sure you're taking 3 minutes in between the cold and the hot so that you're actually letting the body do the work of getting the signal of the shiver or the signal of the sweat and the cool off, so that your body optimizes instead of using the device, like using the cold plunge to, cool off from the sauna, or using the sauna to heat up from the cold plunge. Don't make the device do the work that your body needs to do to optimize, because then you blunt the hard work you just did.
Oh my gosh, I did not know that. I just jumped right in.
You're like one to the other. And also like you can play and you can go back and forth a lot, but this is why Suzanne Soberg might say like end on cold, so that your body's working to have to do that adaptation. And because it's another way we stay comfortable, right? We're like, oh, okay, I'm cold. I'm just going to go get in the sauna. Yeah, so it's like, how can you, again, like build your window of tolerance and all those things.
That's such great.
It's like, that's my pro really tip. Good. It's my pro tip
That is
for
a pro trip. I learned something new.
Yeah.
So I try to use the sauna at night before I go to bed. It really helps me. First of all, your phone overheats in there, so you can't have it.
I love that.
So you have to disconnect from your phone, and it really does. Personally, for me, helps me sleep. So I try to use it at nighttime before bed. Maybe once a week, I'll do hot, cold. When I have time. It's it does take about an hour to do that. How many times hot and cold mechanically do you do?
I like to do like a 3x set, right? So I'm doing like hot and cold, and I'm ending on cold, and it's like 3 rounds.
And 20 minutes in the sauna, or?
Yeah, it depends on if you're using like a dry finish style sauna, which is my preferred sauna, or using a red light one. Sometimes people need longer in the red. But I will do, like 15 minutes. I try to push the sauna in my building to like 190, 200. We try to get it warm. And then I do a lot with, I'm a certified sauna master. So I work with like the snowballs and aromatherapy and steam, and like continuing in the last couple of years to learn more and more about not just the science of that, but like the experience of that. And there's really 2 ways to use a sauna, right? You can use a finished sauna or a hot sauna to get it really hot and detox and sweat in 15 minutes and be hardcore barrel sauna style. But also when you look at like banya culture, there's a whole different landscape of like, let's bring this down to like 140 Fahrenheit. Let's create a lot more steam. Let's make a case for us to be able to sit in there for a bit longer and have relaxation, right? This is like one of the number one things that people write when they leave a big spa is like, what did you come for? They came for relaxation, for unwinding. And the other pivotal piece of all of this that I think is important to just shout out is, as we bring more cold and sauna into our cultural landscape in North America, what we're actually bringing is more community and connection. And I think people are desperate for that, right? And with the likes of places like Othership, I don't know if you've been to Othership. It's like, it's just shout out to Robbie and Harry and Amanda, like the team that has formulated that for the North American landscape. It really is just bringing community and connection back to the world. And it doesn't have to be in another ship location because there's only a few, but having those tools at your home, bringing people together, connecting the dots, people feeling, Gabby and Laird used to always be like, this is the truth barrel. Yeah. When you get in the sauna, it's so hot that you're like, story has to be short. You're going to be really authentic and poignant and quick about it. You're going to tell the truth. And then because you want to get the heck out of the sauna because it's getting so hot. So it's like how we share in those environments are very different. And you said it yourself. You can't have a phone in the cold plunge. I mean, you can and for a minute, and you can't have a phone in the sauna. So what are we leaning into? We're leaning into more connection. And I think I see romances blossom. I see people having laughter and joy and really like looking at each other and into each other's, souls, if you will, to say, oh, like, I am you and you are me. Like, where are we not othering? Where are we like together and connected? Yeah. And that's just like, that may sound woo to some people who are listening, but I think the end game here is like for us to all be more deeply connected, especially in a time of so much disconnection.
Yeah. One of the favorite texts I get during the week is a bat signal. All the guys are getting together to go to a buddy's sauna, and he has a barrel sauna that can put 6 of us in it, and we all just sit there and talk and catch up. And it's like you said, you have 20 minutes, 30 minutes in there, then you're out. And he has a cold plunge right next to it, so we get to do that too. So it's so powerful, and there's so many benefits beyond what you see in the research. And the research is very clear on sauna therapy, that it does lead to cardiovascular benefits, to decreased rate of neurodegenerative diseases, it protects you from cancer, is good for your immune system, anti-inflammatory. There's so much great evidence out there. So you get that plus the connection, plus the nervous system regulation, plus the mental fortitude. It's so powerful. I really appreciate you bringing this to the world in such a thoughtful way, bringing it to women, that this is something that you should also consider doing. It's not just for men. And providing free tools for people to get that first experience. And I think it's awesome of you to do this.
I mean, it's like I always say I worked in the health optimization landscape for many, many years now. And this is really my peak expression is having people understand their nervous system, how they can show up just especially for themselves, right? Filling their own cup and then going out and expressing into the world like all of their greatness. And it's the most, I'm so lucky that I get to do this work, and I get to work with so many different types of clients, from like young females to professional athletes, men, women alike, and groups and corporate events, and really introducing the people into, you want to see people get crazy, you go to a very staunchly corporate, rigid event where like the big bosses and C-level execs are like, we're going to do ice plunges, and then they're going first, and they're like, all of a sudden they're like, little scared kiddos. They're like, oh my God, I don't know. I have to be all tough in front of my work team. No. And so it's like beautiful to see the unveiling of people as they show up, and then the ways that we can all be vulnerable together. Yeah,
I love it. How can people find more from you? Where can they connect with you?
Yeah, I answer all my own DMs still at Kristin Weitzel Official on Instagram. I really like that. It's like a way to connect with people. It's like I try to use social media for good. SherpaBreathandCold.com is where you can see the coaching certification program that comes up. We're launching in October our first fully online. I've been resisting because the power of connection on site is so important.
Yes.
But we're doing our first fully online Sherpa Breath and Cold level 1 training, which is really great because I get a lot of requests globally from people who can't fly from Poland to Boston, you know?
Right.
And so we'll do that in October. And then people can reach me. I have a podcast called the Well Power Podcast. So a lot of free information that you're going to be on my show. It'll be amazing. So I'm pretty easy to reach. Find me, grab me, and tell me how I can support your company, your business, your athleticism, your life, your heart.
I love it. Well, thank you so much. One more question. What's next for you, Kristin?
What's next for me? What's next for me is continuing to work in the landscape of nervous system. I'm training to do a little IFS parts work therapy now, and work with people, because what comes up in breathwork and cold exposure, perhaps you can be in an altered state. But in breathwork, we get out of our prefrontal cortex. Yeah. We get in a little bit of an altered state, working with specific different styles of work, clinicians, medicines, to be able to get people to unpack what's going on in their in their life and really like see themselves for who they are. Because I think we all wake up with this beautiful understanding of like who we can be, but I
Right.
want people to actualize that and be along for the ride to support them and not only healing their bodies, but really like healing their heart and their mind and understanding how great their capacity really is. So more of that to come. Yeah, more of that work.
Well, I love it. I can't wait for you to do that, and we could have you back on and we could talk more about that too.
Yeah, beautiful.
Awesome.
Love it.
Thank you so much for joining me
Yeah,
today.
thank you for your time.